second, it's loading.
Live on YouTube. There we go.
YouTube.
I feel I'm a bit dark. I'm trying to get my lighting better.
We are on YouTube now. So officially, we start in a couple of seconds. Hello, everyone. Let's give them a couple of seconds. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Patrick McKeown and Dean Gladstone. So, Patrick, anytime.
So thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. And we're going to have an interesting conversation. There's a person here that's a lot more interesting than I am. My daughter is fascinated with him, so she'll be popping up in a while. He's one of those guys that you see on Bondi Beach, if you ever watch Bondi Rescue. And his name is Dean Gladstone. So Dean would be on the front line in terms of swimmers getting into difficulty. And that's the conversation that we want to talk about. I think there's a real wide opening for this in terms of bringing breathing exercises and deep sleep into people who are working on the front line. And we're talking about first responders, we're talking about police, we're talking about military. We do have quite a few of our instructors who are coming from those fields. So Dean, a topic that has been often overlooked, can you just give a little bit of background? How long were you as a lifeguard on Bondi?
Yes, I'm still working as a lifeguard, Patrick.
You're still working, cool.
Similar to you, like I was a dysfunctional breather as a child, so I was sent for swimming lessons. And, I'm grateful for this asthma because it ended up giving me a career. It was, a little bit later on, I discovered yoga and then Wim Hof method and then the oxygen advantage where I was like, this is what it's all about.
Oh, because I never realized you had asthma. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was hospitalized. And from a very young age, I was connected my breathing with my swimming. So if I didn't swim, I couldn't run around and play football with my friends. But if I did, I would be able to win like the cross country at school.
Yeah.
So it was night and day for me.
Dean, this is interesting because I'm similar enough. I came across the Buteyko method originally for my own asthma. And I always remember doctors used to say to my mother that I should be swimming.
Yeah.
And they always had this idea that swimming was good for asthma. And I think they put it down to that when you're swimming, you're inhaling warm, moist air and there's less irritation of the lungs, which is slightly plausible. It has got a plausible effect. But in actual fact, the real thing about swimming is that there's pressure, there's resistance to your breathing. You're lying on the water. The water is pressing against your chest and your abdomen. You're breathing against resistance, so it's helping to improve respiratory muscle strength. And at the same time, your face is in the water, And
it's slowing your breath down, Patrick.
It's slowing, you're forced to breathe less air.
1, 2, 3. As opposed to when you're running going like this.
Yeah. But how come that hasn't been, that's such a simple concept and many doctors intuitively understand this, but yet the whole aspect of reduced volume breathing and asthma has been overlooked, even though for swimming it has been, it's weird, isn't it? But any event, that's not the topic of our conversation.
That's not the topic, but the one thing the swimming does, and I hypothesize, because I was a swimmer, that was my sport of choice. I competed at a fairly high level. I won state titles, I made teams. But I believe that contributed to me mouth breathing at night. Because if your main sport is mouth breathing, that's going to be... So although the swimming was good for my asthma in a sense, I believe that it sort of played into my dysfunctional breathing. Mm-hmm. So I'm working with swimmers at the moment and people that are in the water, and it's just a game changer, the mouth taping.
Wow. And in terms of swimming, because again, there's two different kind of points of view, is it possible to breathe adequately through your nose during a swim?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Some people have told me it is, but I think there's always going to be water. You're going to be inhaling water in through the nose.
Yeah. You know, a good swim, an efficient swimming stroke, you don't lift your head, you just turn it ever so slightly. But yeah, I breathe out through my nose, I believe. It's funny to sort of think back at something you've been doing for so long and start to analyze it.
It's unconscious.
We should jump on topic because I don't want to bore people. So in the research, Patrick, we talked about emergency services, but I really, like you touched on, not shift workers particularly struggle, and these first responders. So that was my background as a lifeguard. I've been a lifeguard for 20 years. I think we were going there when we started talking about swimming. So yeah, you know, my asthma sort of led to a career for me down the track as you know, a lifeguard, and you know, sort of led to me saving, maybe rescuing 5,000 people in the last 20 years.
How did you deal with hypervigilance? I'm assuming that if you're on duty, you can't be slouching. You're almost literally on constant alert. Did you find that? Could you isolate that? Could you prevent yourself bringing that home with you?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's we like it. Rescuing people gives you a buzz. Helping people is the lifeguards get a kick out of it. And as I sort of was there longer, I realised that there's a feel-good element. So that the helping people is good. Most of our rescues aren't, if you're competent in the water, like if you train hard and you're healthy and your body works well, for me, I never felt like I was putting myself at risk. Very different to a fireman. I feel quite comfortable going out in large waves.
Of course,
I've done a lot of swimming. I can hold my breath, well, even better now. But yeah, I feel in control. And even they talk about people pulling you under. I have no fear of someone pulling me under. The one person tried it, I pulled them back under and they let go. So as I said, I've rescued 5,000 people. But again, you know, the ocean or the water is my environment. Most of our rescues are not life and death. Most of them, people get caught in a rip or a current. And what happens, Patrick, they panic and they lose control of the breath. So all lifeguards know this. They know that people who get stressed are more likely to panic and die. And in Australia, 400 people drown every year, or around that figure. And they literally go into that fight or flight response. They use all their energy and they can't swim any longer. So the message is quite simple, just to stay calm and stay afloat. And that will save lives.
And it's a message we don't often hear. You know, it's people are encouraged to learn swimming, but I've never heard any news alert telling people if you get difficulty in the water, stay calm. Yes,
stay calm. Stay calm, breathe slowly. And you know, I've rescued so many people and they're hyperventilating. They're in shock. Yeah.
It's amazing, the whole aspect of hyperventilation. There was a podcast with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee on the other day, someday last week. He was interviewing a brain surgeon. You'll see it on his Instagram feed. And the brain surgeon was talking about getting into a tricky situation during surgery. And the one thing that the brain surgeon would not do is hyperventilate. Because he said, if he hyperventilates, just as you described, he's going to lose nerve. So he's not going to be composed. And he talked about his colleagues thinking that he's got nerves of steel. Whereas in actual fact, the surgeon just knew how to handle his physiology.
Yeah, well, you know, you could probably articulate it better than I. What's the decrease of blood flow to the brain when you start hyperventilating? It goes
it's significant. It's 1 millimeter of mercury drop for every 1 millimeter drop in mercury, blood flow to the brain reduced by 2%, and you can lower the blood flow CO2 by about 50% in 30 seconds to 1 minute. So you can have a 40% reduction of blood flow to the brain in about a minute.
Yeah.
And faster and harder breathing, a very natural response in because of stress. But of course, evolution hasn't kept pace. But then again, if you look at the evolution of the human species, modern day life is such an insignificant and small part of that we have evolving that in actual fact, evolution really, really worked well for us, but it's only in the last probably couple of 100 years, really, maybe 1,000 years, at most 2,000 years, which is still a very insignificant, part of evolution. So it just I suppose the way we have adapted, we haven't adapted to keep pace with the pace of evolution, with the pace of modern society. But one thing, Dean, if you get stressed, if I get stressed, now I think as well with better breathing, not think it, but something that has stood me well over the last 20 plus years was having an awareness of the breath, being able to slow the breath, being attentive to the breath, but also everyday breathing. By improving it, you're just better able to deal with stressful situations.
Yeah, well, it's counterintuitive, Patrick. It's just like that person in the rip. So people think if they fight and they try and get back to shore, that they're going to survive. When actually the opposite is true. They need to stay calm and relax. Big wave surfers, when they get pinned down by a wave, they panic and they try and get back up to the surface. Again, intuition says get back up to the surface, right? And the reverse is true. They need to relax, like that person in the rip, stay calm, and they'll come up when the ocean lets them up. Now, a doctor or someone operating, when they get anxious, they think, I'll breathe more. It's going to help me, but the reverse is true. It
and the brain surgeon in our case knew that. And maybe this is why breath holds are quite useful. We're doing breath holds for many years. And when you do a long breath hold, it creates a feeling of discomfort.
Absolutely.
And you have to kind of relax into it. So I can imagine that if you were in trouble in the water, if you were used to doing long breath holds out of the water, that when you got into trouble in the water, you were more likely to be able to relax into that feeling of suffocation.
Absolutely. If you're training something, you're going to improve at it and you'll be familiar with the response. We were doing underwater rock running. Have you seen? You would have seen.
I've seen it. I've seen your photographs. Yeah.
So we did that. There's a little clip on YouTube where we did it 15 years ago, but we didn't actually know, that we were training hypoxic hypercapnic response.
Yes.
But yet we did it because we felt good afterwards.
Yeah. But there's something else going on here. You're teaching yourself how to cope with stress. Absolutely. And it's not just a stress because of the feeling of suffocation, but if we can relax into that feeling, because it's very primordial, that air hunger is very primordial. If we can tolerate strong suffocation, we can train. Just my own perception is that we can then deal with not any situation, but situations as they unfold, even though they're not related to breathing at all. But just the very fact that you can relax. So I did give the example that, yes, if you're underwater, okay, that would make sense that you're able to relax into the feeling of air hunger, that you're not going to panic. But even relaxing into that feeling of air hunger, it develops your willpower. And it also develops your tolerance, that when there's a stressful situation, you're better able to cope with that. Something that it's kind of interesting that it transfers, one transfers over to the other.
Yeah. But for lifeguards and firemen, being able to hold your breath is a functional requirement of the job. So, yes. and breathing less, with those firemen, and I've spoke to a couple this week just to sort of check up on the facts. They've got respiratory devices, right? And if they're over breathing, they're going to go through their oxygen.
Totally. And the other thing is, as people are aware, if you have any sort of tendency towards anxiety and panic disorder, you can have a strong chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. So when you wear a mask, you're pooling carbon dioxide. And as a result, there's a claustrophobic effect with wearing the mask. Yes. So you can imagine wearing all of that gear. Say that again.
In a fire.
Yeah,
people
for sure.
Potentially dying, and the pressure on them to save someone's life. I've had the honor of bringing, 20 people back to life, Patrick. Wow. And you could bottle that feeling. It is the most amazing feeling of your whole life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
When it doesn't go right, and sometimes it's through no fault of your own.
Of course.
They could just have a massive heart attack. But the feeling is, it just lingers for a week, and it's awful.
Yeah. In terms of respiratory physiology, because I know there's been some firemen that have gone through our program, and improved tolerance to CO2 doesn't really come into it, or at least I'm not aware of it. Breath hold time doesn't come into it. But yet, there's an interesting story about a Dr. Colonel Flack that was published in The Lancet back in 1919. And this pilot, he was with the Royal Air Force. He was a physiologist with the Royal Air Force. A pilot went up, and the pilot had a low breath hold time. He was using breath hold time on the ground as a measure of stress. And his thesis was, because of course a pilot going up into altitude, the air is thinner, so their breathing is more likely to be labored. And his whole aspect is, if we send up a pilot, and if they've got a low breath hold time at rest at sea level, they're going to have a very low breath hold time at altitude. And he described that they are going to be panting and hyperventilating at altitude. And in one situation, a pilot did have a low breath hold time, but the pilot flew and he crashed. And it wasn't due to any fault with the plane, so it was down to human error. And as a result then, breath hold time was introduced into this squadron in the Royal Air Force back in 1919, but yet breath hold time as a measure of stress hasn't been introduced into emergency responders. I think it has a role to play because, as you know, it's a good measure of the degree of breathlessness, but also in terms of tolerance of stressful situations and staying calm. And just, I'll stop talking in a second, but there was one study looking at the breathing of music students going into doing a concert. And it was found that, of course, anxiety kicks in a little bit before the concert and breathing becomes harder and faster. But the study found that it was the students whose breathing became most irregular had the most anxiety. And this again is, we have to ask two questions. One is, improve the everyday breath hold time so that your breathing is going to stay more regular going into a stressful situation, but also when you're in that stressful situation, tap into your breathing. Do you think, Dean, many people have some attention on their breathing, or do you think most people or many people that their attention is stuck in their head, that they're not even connected with the breath?
Well, the courses that I run, Patrick, the people's awareness of breathing has gone up exponentially. They've, Wim Hof and then James Nestor's book and Oxygen Advantage, and now your new book, what they sort of follow a path. And there's people mouth taping, there's athletes are doing it more. I had an athlete at a course on the weekend, and he was mouth taping while training, but he didn't understand why he was doing it, Patrick. He
was just doing it intuitively.
No, that was part of the team training, and he hated it and he struggled with it and he wasn't good at it. And I started to explain, if he did it and how he would improve, and by, increasing the load and even the lactic shuttling through his body. And he messaged me later. He took 6 shots at goal that afternoon and he did nasal breathing before it and he kicked all 6. So it was, that is how we get buy-in with professional teams or even local teams, is just getting them to feel it and understand it.
I think the understanding is a key aspect of it. And I think this is where it's gone wrong with breathing. And again, this thought was coming into my head. Breathing has been around for a long time. Why is it just now it's starting to take off? It's because the people who are putting it out there, and James Nestor has done a great job at it. Wim Hof, in fairness, has done a great job as well in putting it out there. But it's happened really in the last 20 years, but breathing has been around for thousands of years. I just feel that it wasn't put out there in the right context. And it was more, I really feel that breathing should be every person. And it of course, it should be taught in schools. But going back 10 years ago, Dean, I was doing breathing, bringing together functional breathing with mindfulness for anxiety and stress. Post-economic crash here in Ireland was in a pretty bad spot. Men weren't turning up. Do men turn up to yours? What did you find in terms of, are men getting more in tune with the breath? And why do you think? Because again, if you think of first responders, these guys are going to be alpha males, alpha females. These guys are in a state of hypervigilance. Even though, say, for example, a lifeguard, you're observing everything. Of course, you have to be all the time. But if you're in the police, you have to be alert all the time. Otherwise, there's a risk of, an adverse reaction or an adverse situation. This hypervigilance has to lead to burnout, and burnout rates and alcoholism and taking prescribed medication. But sleep is also impacted. So the alpha male and the alpha female, in terms of breathing, do you adopt a different approach when you're working with them?
So the most people I work with is in sort of a 3-hour workshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually I like to make everyone feel comfortable, Patrick. And as we generally go around the room, almost like a yoga sharing circle, I like to find out why people have come.
Yeah, but you're not making it too hippy dippy though, because that might turn people off.
Not too hippy dippy. It seems to work. I co-present with my girlfriend. We make bad jokes. We
Sure.
make people comfortable, but also we let people open up. And in the last year, we've noticed a lot of people are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And if people can just share and feel that everyone is working through their own issues, as we all are,
Sure. Yeah.
it just puts the room at ease, and people can talk and people can be comfortable. Through there we go through bolt scores and MBTs, and actually on the weekend I had a competitive group. They wanted to do the MBT again, and so we get.
And
there she is.
There she is. Yeah, she's coming over to say hello. So yeah.
Good morning.
So here, you're going to say hello to Dean? Can you go?
Hi.
Hello, lovely.
She's a big fan, Dean.
Big fan. Oh, I'm a big fan of your dad. Amazing. You changed my life.
Really?
Yeah. Have you been watching Bondi Rescue?
Yeah.
When is it on?
What?
When is it on?
Well, I watch it on YouTube.
I watch it on YouTube. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what?
Next time you're here, come out. I think I tried to take your dad surfing last time he was here.
I can't hear it, Dean, but
Daddy.
what was that, Dean? Sorry.
Saying I was trying to take you surfing. I think last time you were here in 2018.
Well, the next time we'll do that though. But water and swimming. I only learned to swim when I was 14 years of age, and I think it's an Irish thing as well. I suppose, even though we're only about 6 miles from the coast, but the water is pretty cold. Maybe that's a good thing. But as a kid, it kind of deter you. You're put off from it. But. Yeah, but this girl here has no fear of the cold anyway. We have a small place outside. She swims, and it's all good. Great. So I'm gonna come back now. Bye. So she's very keen on hopefully with COVID. But coming back to that, so in terms of increased anxiety during COVID, and you're working in a circle and you're getting that support and you're getting people to talk. And I suppose if we're all working from home, or many of us are working from home, people are missing out on that social interaction. Whereas in a group environment like that, and you'll probably have people with a lot of things in common, so that they're starting to realize that they're not the only ones there. There's some support there.
Yeah. And that's, it's just really important to be comfortable. And not to feel stressed and not to be embarrassed. And I don't want people cheating through the assessments. I always tell people that do poorly in the bolt score, the MBT, those assessments, that they have got the most to gain out of the day.
Totally.
Because they are going to see significant improvement, and they'll notice their life change more than the people that are already doing well. Yeah,
in actual fact, it's the person coming in with a bolt score of 10 seconds or 15 seconds. They know that something is not quite right. And we have to then ask, why could the bolt score be so low? Very much it's influenced by genetics. Like, there is a genetic predisposition, and this was written by McGurk going back, 20 or 30 years. Respiratory physiology hasn't changed all that much in 50 years. And Dr. John West he said exactly just that. But other factors then that can change bolt score is inflammation in the lungs. So people with asthma or childhood asthma, there's a cognitive component to it. So people with a little bit of anxiety or panic disorder, and also in females, hormonal changes can really influence the bolt score. I know when one of our instructors, Georgie, her bolt score would be 31 seconds. And once she goes post-ovulation, into the middle luteal phase, her bolt score is dropping down by 6 seconds. But of course, if you go from 31 down to 25 seconds, you're not doing too badly. But if you've got a bolt score of 15 and you're dropping it 6 seconds, say for a female, 15 to 9 seconds, you're going to feel that, you know. So the bolt score is interesting.
My bolt score, Patrick, can float from, you know, almost 40 when I'm feeling excellent down to, you know, if I feel like I'm getting sick, it's 18,
Lowers.
17.
Yeah,
So
and the heart rate typically
yeah
goes up. Coming back to first responders, so I'll give you an example. I'm working with an elite police next week, and one of the things that I've been asked to do is to teach or talk about, because I've never shot a gun, and it's not something that kind of you know, I don't have an interest or anything in that, but how to breathe while shooting a gun. Now, here is kind of an avenue of the breath, even getting down to this detail, because you can imagine, say, for example, if you've got a SWAT team or if you've got elite police going into a stressful situation, number one is they are running into the situation. If they have a low bolt score, they're going to have excessive breathlessness.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, they have to get their breathing down to be able to focus on a trigger. And it's really about even breaking it down. So I'm thinking about, now I reached out to a couple of guys. I reached out to instructor Joey Williams and also to Scott McGee, two guys who were in SWAT. And I asked them, I said, what would be the best way to do this in terms of changing states when you're in a situation like this? Do you breathe in and hold your breath? Because that's what some people are doing. However, if you can imagine running into a situation and the person is gassed out and they're ramped up and the heart rate is ramped up and their breathing is ramped up, the last thing that you're going to do is breathe in and hold your breath, because you really want to get your breath rate down. Yeah. So we decided then, it was on the advice of the two SWAT members, that it's relaxing into the exhalation. And we always know that, you know, if you're doing that,
snipers do as well, Patrick. They
relax into it.
Yeah. But again, different things work for different people. I have heard a slight breath hold as, you know, maybe that core activation feels like they give that extra stability.
Yeah, so when the diaphragm, if you breathe in, so you're talking about breathing in and holding the breath, so the diaphragm is moving downwards.
Yeah.
And interesting,
like holding everything tight. It's almost at the bottom of a lift. You know, for those people that aren't using weights, they're using the core as an internal weight belt.
Yeah,
and it's putting pressure on the ascending and descending colon, the internal, external obliques, and it's like a square, right?
Yeah. So you're talking about the core as being, you've got the diaphragm to the top, the pelvic floor, we've got the abs to the front, and we've got the spinal muscles to the back. But so this will be one part of the conversation. Another part of the conversation we will have is bringing in sleep. Shift workers, Dean, I haven't really delved into too much depth in terms of shift workers.
I looked at a study yesterday, and it's been done on registered nurses. And I think the study, it's an old study or an old ongoing study, and I think there were 75,000 nurses, and they referred to them as women, which I'm not sure if they're all women, but that's what it said. And for those nurses that had worked over 5 years of continual or night shift, it was, and I wrote this down, they were 11% early to die, 11% more likely to die early, 38% higher risk of dying of heart disease. There was a 25% higher risk of lung cancer, but they also noted the night shift were more likely to smoke, but colon cancer was also increased 33%. So it was dangerous, that long-term night shift.
And I wonder, is this because of disruption of the circadian rhythm, that the body is out of whack? And as a result, of course, the person is, there's a description that James Nestor used, that you're half asleep during the day and half awake at night. And I think it's synonymous. And so you've got, in terms of the night shift, so factory workers, and there are so many different individuals who are going to be falling into that realm. So what would you do, or what would you advise them in terms of getting that deeper sleep by changing the breath?
Yeah. Well, there's, you know, one of the firemen, he put it he put it really well. There's pre-training or pre-work where we're working on functional breathing. Then there's during an emergency, so looking at how they're breathing and how they're responding. And then there's recovery, so looking at sleep and looking at breathing to slow the mind and looking at breathing to even exercise and feel well the next day. So it's sort of broken down to pre, during, and post.
So for the fireman, you'd bring in, or the firewoman, you'd bring in functional breathing into, say, fitness programs. Sorry, that 1 second. Change that, Lucas. Sorry, if you can take over that. So coming back to Dean, or is it me that has control here?
Breathing for firemen, like that is, they need to be able to hold their breath. Like that is a must for those guys. They get call outs in the middle of the night, Patrick. So they can be asleep and their bell rings and they literally have to get up and just go into full flight. Wow. And so they're racing and they go to a job and they could get there and it could just be an alarm going off. So after that, they have to go back to the station and try and get back to sleep.
So down-regulate.
Down-regulating, slow nasal breathing.
I wonder, what do they do to down-regulate? Now, we know what to do to down-regulate in terms of tapping into the physiology. So when we're overstimulated, it's difficult to fall asleep. And the problem with waking up after a few hours of sleep, even if you're an environment that's in that situation, they may have had 3 or 4 hours sleep and then they're woken up. So it's disrupted.
Yeah.
They've had 3 or 4 hours sleep. So they're not quite exhausted enough to go back asleep, but yet they're not quite awake enough to be fully alert. So in terms of the down regulation, I use the breathe light. I think it's a really, just having people just focusing on their breathing, taking a very soft and light breath in through the nose and a really relaxed and a slow and prolonged exhalation. And there's 2 things happening. One is the increased carbon dioxide in the blood is stimulating the vagus nerve. Yep. The other is the slow and prolonged and relaxed exhalation is helping to stimulate the vagus nerve. And when the vagus nerve is stimulated, the neurotransmitter acetylcholine is released, and this causes a slowing of the heart. And when the heart rate is slowing down, the brain then is interpreting that the body is in a safe environment, so the brain sends messaging accordingly. Like, it's a very nice way to downregulate. And I can only imagine, even the surgeon that we spoke about earlier on, if he's in a shift and say, for example, he's doing his work, he gets into a tricky situation as he describes it. How do you alter that state? There's the exhalation. When we prolong it and slow it down, that brings the body into balance. It's all in the exhalation. In other words, it's not really on the inhalation. Yeah. So, and if we compare that, say, with the Wim Hof method, which is kind of more of a stressor.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not something you would do before you would go to sleep, because you're having a fast breath in and a really fast breath out. And it's
some people do, Patrick.
They do, okay.
That fast breathing, when they go into that breath retention, it's this beautiful stage of mental clarity, which is why I love the breathe light exercise. So it just, I'm just focusing on the breath, and then it just clears my head.
Yeah. I wonder, is it because there's some people who can take a cup of coffee before they go to sleep and they'll fall asleep, and there's some people who can't, they'll be totally wired. Is it just that the breath can affect us a bit differently?
Yeah, there's different things work for different people, different diets, different breathing techniques. People have different likes, and I find I'm trying to sort whatever people like. Something though, if they like it, they're more likely to do it.
Yeah. So you'll be doing hyperventilation and breath holding with your group, and then you'll bring them in through the breathe light exercises. You'll get them running as well with the mouth closed, running with breath holds, etc. And then do your targeting as well. And I'm sure in the 3 dimensions: breathing light, breathing slow, and breathing low.
Yeah.
And it's in terms of what has been the response from the groups, getting people to stick with it.
Yeah, it's once we can get some breath awareness or some buy-in, and then when they become stressed, they start to pick up on it. So they've got that awareness that they're stressed, and then they can do whatever they need to do, whatever works for them. They can bring that in into their life, where they can go, oh, hang on, I'm stressed. And so it's just getting people connected with their own bodies, Patrick.
I think it's huge. And
So
Dean,
people like the fast breathing at the start, and I feel that fast breathing brings them into the breath awareness.
because they can feel it.
They're less likely to go to the drug cabinet or even use alcohol, something like that, when they go, hang on, my body's really powerful. I can use it. So that's what I love, the natural therapy element of it.
Yeah.
You know, and just explaining to people, you're less likely to get sick.
Yeah. And it's been shown, you know, Kevin Tracy in 1998, he stimulated the vagus nerve electronically, and he found that it could reduce inflammation, that it blocks pro-inflammatory cytokines, which trigger inflammation. And if you think of the amount of diseases that inflammation plays a role, and then if we think about, well, how can we trigger the vagus nerve? So even something like gargling, humming, slow breathing to between 4.5 to 6.5 breaths per minute. Breathing hard and fast must also trigger the vagus, stimulate the vagus nerve. And I think this is what's happening with the Wim Hof, even though the hyperventilation and the breath holding, it was a stressor. And it was thought that, you know, there was a relationship between the amount of adrenaline that was produced and the reduction to pro-inflammatory cytokines. But I also wonder, is that the fact that they were breathing hard and fast, that they were engaging the diaphragm, and it was the active exercising of the diaphragm which was stimulating the vagus nerve, and it was actually the vagus nerve which reduced the pro-inflammatory cytokines. Breath holding will do it. Hypercapnia will do it. The breathe light exercises that we're doing it. And, you know, I suppose now we're going a little bit off topic, but I don't think we are, because all of these issues and mental health are going to be coming back to first responders. Poor sleep quality, burnout.
It's you know, you just hit it on the head, Patrick. It's hard to quantify exactly what's going to work for each person. And in a sense, we're talking about, you know, what everybody should be doing for their breathing. And one of the big things that I did think, we're looking to implement breathing techniques for when people are struggling. We should be, these people especially, like these nurses that are more likely to die, they need to be breathing better than other people, because they're already at risk. Our police, we want them breathing better. We want them calm when you know, fire up. So these people should be at the top, and they're not getting much support internally. They're externally paying themselves, so they're paying to come and see me, and doing a multitude of, you know, meditation and all sorts of things to complement natural health. So I do wonder, because I'm working with more and more corporates as well, you know, are corporates ahead in some way? But it's, you know, it's different people and different courses and different governments all over the place.
I think the military are ahead. And I think the military at the moment are ahead of the corporate. Even in the training session we're doing at the moment, we have one of the instructors from one of the Air Forces. And the last time we had, in September, I go to a country in Europe, and I work with a number of squadrons, teaching the pilots and bringing in functional breathing. And I think, Dean, it's always been, oftentimes innovations have taken place from a military setting, and those innovations then are carried into normal civilian life. That soldiers, you know, you spoke about stress there. If you're stressed in the corporate environment, and if you make a mistake, okay, you could lose some money. But if you're stressed in a military environment and you make a mistake, people can die. It's an entirely different situation there.
Same for lifeguards.
And the same for lifeguards.
Well, the good thing about being a lifeguard is that no one's shooting at you, so you're less likely to get. Whereas in the military, you're
being shot at, and you're shooting as well. But here is coming back to, so that you spoke about your fireman. You're working to train their everyday breathing, so they have good breathing patterns during the day. You understand that if you can improve your everyday breathing patterns, when a situation arises, you're automatically carrying that good functional breathing into the situation. You've got reduced breathlessness as a result of the physical exercise. You're better able to cope with wearing the mask, the breathing apparatus. You're less likely to run out of air, but I think they have kind of a time limit anyway, that they're only in there for so many minutes before they get back out again. But even the panic, dealing with the panic.
Broke, Patrick, if that mask broke, if there was a mishap, thinking, you know, I can go maybe 100 steps without breathing, and having done that, that training response is built
you
up.
can fall back in on that.
It would just give you that extra confidence to potentially save a life. So
and also then, if there is a difficult situation that if you find that you're too ramped up, you want to down regulate pretty quickly, you bring your attention onto the breath, even if it's just for 3 or 4 breaths. And you're taking a very soft breath in through your nose and a slow and prolonged and relaxed exhalation to bring the body into recovery. So then you can focus better. And then after that, then for recovery, then going to sleep, improving the depth of sleep. So there's a number of things to it. Like I spoke about Maslow's. I'm writing a book at the moment, and the book at the moment is on concentration, focus, and attention span. And here are tools that absolutely are necessary and vital to every walk of life, whether it's the young kid in school, the teenager, the corporate worker, the military, the sports person. And if we think of focus, we're thinking about narrowing our attention down to one thing. Now, at the moment, social media and information technology is competing for people's attention. So we have to train focus. And then focus on itself isn't good unless we have concentration. And concentration is holding our attention on one thing. So focus is narrowing our attention, that we are honing in on a specific target, whether it's work or whether it's health.
Well,
Is
it just Patrick that's frozen?
Yeah, he's frozen.
I was just about to tell Patrick a really good story. One of my mates, Ben, who I spoke to, he's a paramedic that I was working with. He had to deliver a baby last week, and the girl that he was working with, she hadn't delivered a baby before. So in the ambulance on the way to deliver this baby, he was taking her through slow breathing exercises. He's literally reading the Oxygen Advantage right now. And it was a great story, but it's a shame Patrick's not here to.
I'm back now, but I was.
He's back.
I was really in the flow state there. So this is the internet in the west coast of Ireland, so you'll have to bear with me. But I was talking about like in terms of focus, concentration, and attention span, and really that's being about training the brain for self-control. And we really need that ability, not just to be able to narrow our attention and hone it to one thing, but we do need to be able to hold our attention, and we need to be able to hold our attention there for a good period of time. Otherwise, we're not going to get into flow states, that coveted state. And you know what? Flow state, psychologists are talking about it for years. Can you achieve a flow state if you have lousy sleep quality, if you have dysfunctional breathing? I don't think so. I don't think so. And like, why put this out there? And the other thing is, Dean, people who are genetically predisposed to a little bit of anxiety and panic disorder, 80% of this population have dysfunctional breathing patterns, and that's going to hold them back. And think of the kid in school, and I was that kid as well, and I often use the example, and I'm not unique. There are thousands and tens of thousands of kids, poor sleep quality because of sleep disorder breathing, upper chest and fast breathing and mouth breathing. And my daughter has the same genetics that I have. It is a genetic thing, and I have some work to go with them. Sometimes it's not always work. It's not always easier working with your own family, but I understand the importance of it, because if a kid goes into school with poor sleep and poor breathing, they don't have focus, they don't have concentration, they don't have attention span, and yet society is labeling these kids as being intelligent or not based on academic grades, not taking into consideration their sleep and their breathing. But it's not just, of course, just the kid in school. It's the police person, it's the lifeguard. It's no matter whatever walk of life, we need those simple basic things. And yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs needs to be revised.
I wear the Aura ring.
Yes.
And I got interested in HRV, and I had to start tracking my own HRV to learn more about it. But the sleep is just the game changer for me.
Yeah.
If you worry about the sleep, everything seems to look after it themselves. And it's I train people as well, and sometimes it's literally telling them, because they want to watch, at the end of the day, they literally want to watch Netflix, and they just want to watch a show or two. And 1 minute it's 8:30, next minute they've watched an extra show on Netflix as Netflix design show, and next minute it's 10:30, and they want to get up early and train, and they're just missing that quality sleep, Patrick.
Yeah.
And everything else flows from there.
Yeah. So quantity is one thing, and that's about having adequate sleep time, and quality is the other thing. And this is where you spoke about wearing the tape at night, waking up feeling more refreshed. 50% of the adult population are mouth breathing during sleep, waking up with a dry mouth in the morning. So that, and it's the one thing that has been overlooked as well in sleep hygiene. I really think that nasal breathing, and something that we've seen over the years. But the other thing is, Dean, fast and slow breathing during sleep. So say, for example, we're lying there, and if you have somebody with a tendency towards asthma, their breathing is typically that bit faster and harder. And faster breathing, the brain is interpreting that the body is under threat, and the brain is going to wake up. So insomnia as a result.
More likely to go to the toilet. It just all flows. And for people in emergency services that might have had a night shift, it's even more, they're not going to get the best quality sleep anyway. So they need to be nasal breathing.
And switching off, hypervigilance is a huge, I'm just thinking about the police person constantly having to be on alert, even when you're off duty, because how can you switch off? The body and mind is being trained to stay with this state of composure, and you finish your shift, but you can't just suddenly leave it behind you.
Yeah, I spoke to a police officer last week at one of my courses, and because I was doing a little bit of research for this chat, I'm delving deeper into their questions.
Yeah.
So when he did his taser course, the taser to shoot, they got them exercising first, so they increased their heart rate. They had heavy metal music playing, and they had 5 people screaming at them, and their job was just to focus on the one person. Yeah. So they trained the stress response, they trained everything, but they didn't train to get them back out of it, Patrick.
Yeah.
So that's where we were, he's training in the stress response.
Yes.
There's
no recovery afterwards.
But the recovery afterwards was where we wanted to work.
And I think this is a really important point. It is the recovery. To downregulate after these events. Joey Williams as well, who's a lieutenant with SWAT, I mentioned about him earlier. He has his officers do breath holds going into a situation, because his premise is that they go into simulated environments. After a while, they kind of get used to them, and the stress element is gone. So he used breath holds, or even wearing the sports mask, going into these situations to stress out the officers further. And it kind of reminds me of Tiger Woods' father, that when Tiger Woods was a kid growing up playing golf, his father would be belting a club off the ground and dropping clubs and making loads of noise to constantly distract him. An interesting take on it, but the recovery is the key. And this is the piece that's often been overlooked.
And more important for people, night shifts, first responders, these people are more likely to see more stress, more occupational stress. And that leads to more death, more injury, more suicide. And it's, I think you've said it. I think in the future, big businesses and, government needs to take more responsibility for the health of their workers. And actually, I was going to say before, I do wonder if sports teams are tracking their athletes and are seeing when they go to sleep.
They are more.
Potentially you could have, if you're paying, $1 million plus per athlete, and they're up all night doing God knows, like even if they're not drinking or doing anything like that, just the fact that they're not sleeping is going to affect their performance.
We spoke with Anna, I think Anna Westwood, but she's working with Premiership, and Nick Littlehale's going back as well, has been working with Premiership football about getting the sleep quality right, and even thermal regulation. If you're in a bed that's too hot for you, your breathing is automatically going to become faster during your sleep, and this is going to more likely to arouse you. But also people with dysfunctional breathing patterns, or people, say females as well, post-menopause, sleep disorder breathing is a factor here. So the female is going, through menopause, age 51 to 55, thereabouts. Sleep disorder breathing can increase by 200 to 300%. If she has sleep apnea, she's more prone to night sweats. So here you've got, it really is, everything is kind of coming in together. We're talking about getting functional breathing every day. We're talking about being able to...
partners sleep on that as well, Patrick.
Say that again, Dean.
If your partner's a dysfunctional breather, it's going to affect your sleep.
Totally.
So there's even other elements to add on top of it. So there's so many pieces to the puzzle.
There's a lot. I'm just going to have a look at some comments here, and I see Tom Heron is here, who's going back, myself and Tom going back a long, long time. And he's talking about have a look at breathing and the ancient Japanese archery. And there is a lot that we can take from the warriors of old, and when you're thinking about the current day MMA fighters or the people who were involved as warriors, they're very much, it's about our society is very much extrovert, but breathing is very much kind of an introvert, because we have to bring our attention inwards. But there's something wonderful about bringing our attention inwards. And maybe this is why. So here's Tom here on full. Tom, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I was working with clay pigeon shooters.
Sure,
and they were their issue. Like, these guys could hit the thing every time, and their issue was distractions from their own teammates, because they would drop something, they would drop a comment, and they would stay with a comment.
Yes. And
it's fascinating stuff. But the breathing was they did it with a breath hold.
So what did they do? They breathed in and held their breath.
Breathed in, breathed out, and held their breath. It was steadier for them, But there's breathing is so personal. What works for one may not work for the other. So you have to work out what suits them.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. And another thing, I was working with a Coast Guard, and his main issue was the people he couldn't help, because the thing would only hold 7 people. The helicopter would only hold 7 or whatever, and there was 14 needed rescued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you make that call?
Yeah, how do you make the call? So his issue was that. So basically, prevention's always better than cure. And my experience has been, and doing this with yourself, Patrick, for quite some time, prevention's always better than cure. And when we train ourselves up into things, like I was always claustrophobic, and basically when you're in the tunnels in Vietnam, and you see the tiny tunnels that the people were using.
Yes.
When you see that, the tiny tunnels, and good breathing, calm completely, because it was used to doing it.
Yeah.
But basically, it's in situ if you're not used to doing it.
Yes. So what you're saying is that, so in line with what myself and Dean were talking about, we need to make breathing a part of our everyday. We need to be in tune with our breath all of the time, so that when you do need it, you can instantly tap into it. It's almost that breathing should be part of our DNA.
It's a lifestyle change. It's not a technique.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle change. And that's basically what it is. And that's what I teach from all the time, is a lifestyle change. It's not a technique. You just do it. And you do it at night as well. And dealing with a lady that had COPD, she's 87 years old. Now, she hadn't smoked in 20 years, but she still smoked for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And just reducing, she had polyps in her nose. So she couldn't do the nose pinching because her nose would bleed, you know. So we started to do humming, and we started to do a very small throat lock breath hold.
Yeah.
And she's now doing, 5 minutes on a bike 5 times a day.
Great stuff.
You know.
Great stuff. And did the nasal polyps, have they shrank?
The nose has stopped bleeding. And
she can breathe through it. Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Tom. I'm going to come back to Dean.
One more thing, Patrick, just before I go.
Sure.
It's really useful to look at the work of let me see if I can get his name here. Just one second. Mike Tipton.
Mike
Tipton. Professor Mike Tipton.
Mm-hmm.
And Professor Mike Tipton is a professor of extreme physiology, and he shows how little water it takes to drown you. It would, it's really, and they talk about dry drowning and stuff like that, but it's the initial inhale when you go into cold water is enough to drown you. It's not hypothermia.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's not hypothermia.
Yeah.
So it's the initial shock.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
It's good work,
No, it's great. It's great. Dean, we're going to draw to a close. For people reaching out to you in terms of, you're based in Australia.
That's right.
And you're teaching online.
No, teaching face to face.
Face to face.
I do a little bit of everything, Patrick. I train people. I teach a little bit of yoga, not much. I'm doing more and more breath-related stuff, but that can look very different, from getting people into ice baths to presenting, breathing, just like at corporate stuff. A little bit of health coaching. A lot of it is health and wellness based. Even the lifeguarding I consider health and wellness because I'm keeping other people alive. But there's less and less of that these days. I've only done a couple of shifts this year. But now I see my role as training and training the lifeguards and
you're training instructors.
Training other people and working in that route. And that's where my passion is. I love being able to help people. How would people reach out to you? Instagram's a good way at Dean Gladstone. Dino Gladstone. My more breath specific page is Power of the Breath. Power of the Breath. Right. I've got websites and if you Google me, I come up. So there's lots of ways to get in touch, so people can get in touch and find me, and there's bits and pieces all over the place. Great stuff. Listen, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for Lucas for organising, as always, and of course for the contributions from Tom. And thank you, Dean. It was really great. Thank you, Dean. It was great. My pleasure. And I'm just going to look at, I think I only see one question. We have one question in YouTube as well. So if you want me to... Okay. Shane Moloney say, do you have to contend with institutional reticence when sharing these ideas with organizations? How do you deal with a skeptical organizational group? Yeah, well, I'll give you my take, and to be honest with you, I only kind of put my energy out to where people want it. 20 years ago, when I was approaching, I'll give you an example, the Asthma Society of Ireland, and I wanted them to investigate breathing for asthma, and I was meeting total resistance. So I drew the conclusion then, well, I want to reach out to the people who, if they're interested in it. Sorry, I've got building now at the moment, which is not ideal, but that's why my focus is on, there's going to be enough people who are interested in it, and it is becoming more popular. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I think Patrick's building. Thanks everybody. It's always a pleasure to chat with Patrick. I haven't spoken to him for couple of months. Yeah, I always enjoy hearing his voice. Spent so much
Okay,
time.
great.
Yes.
God bless.
Before,
Thank you.
before we go, I
Yes.
want to thank everyone to join us and all instructors worldwide that are here, like Daniel Borovoy from Mexico, Juan Sanz from Spain. In Mexico is very early as well. Tom, thank you so much. And all people that are always here with us. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Dean. And keep the great job. Very honored
Thank you,
to
Lucas.
be
Thank
part
you,
of
you.
this
Lucas, for looking
conversation.
after us.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Keep
Right.
with the building that clinic, Patrick. Very interesting thing.
Stay with the
See you
winners.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Lucas, does this go on YouTube or something later? Or is the recording live? Do you
Yeah,
edit
please,
it?
everyone. You can watch the recording immediately on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you guys want to share it, all the people that is here want to share with people that may be interested in this conversation, you can share from YouTube. Okay. Leave your comments there, questions, and we will try to answer them.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Bye bye.
Bye.